A guy was sitting in his favorite chair watching TV. His wife came up behind him and hit him over the head with a frying pan. He screams, "Hey, what's that for?" His wife said, "I was doing the washing, and I found a piece of paper with the name Dorothy on it." Me. He says, "I was at the racetrack yesterday, and that's the horse I was betting on." A week later, he was sitting in the same favorite chair, and his wife came up behind him and hit on the head again with the frying pan. He said, "What was that for?" His wife said. Dorothy called. The sick Mexican was lying on his deathbed. He had only hours to live when suddenly he smelled tamales. He loved tamales more than anything else in the world, especially his wife's tamales. With every last bit of energy left in his body, the sick Mexican pulled himself out of bed, across the floor, down the hall, and into the kitchen. He saw that his wife was removing a fresh batch of tamales from the stovetop. As he reached for one of the freshly made tamales, his wife smacked him in with a wooden spoon. "Leave them alone, cabron. They're for the funeral." 2. There once was this guy who was going on a date to the movies with a beautiful girl. Before he went, he made the mistake of eating a jumbo can of beans. Right after he picked her up, he felt the need to fart, but he figured he could wait until they got to the movies. When they got there, he asked her if she wanted some popcorn and Coke. She said sure, so he went to the restroom. The line was long, so he went back to the lobby, got the food, and went back into the theater. When the movie was over, he goes to the bathroom again, still with a tremendously long line. So he figures he can wait until he drops her off. When they pull up into her driveway, she exclaims, "Oh, goody! My grandparents are here. Come on in and meet them." He agrees, finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer, tried to let it seep out a little at a time. As he squeezed out a toxic blast, he aimed it towards the family's hound dog, Duke, in hopes that they might blame the pooch for the horrendous fart. The girl's father stands up and hollers, "Duke!" and sits back down. Great, he thought. They really think it's the dog. So he starts bombarding the room with a couple, more powerful, louder stinkers. Once again, the girl's father stands up, shouts, "Duke!" and sits back down. Finally, he lets it all go, and the loudest, most hair-curling fart you've ever heard or smelt rippled through the dining room. The girl's father stands up again. "Duke, get the hell out from under him before he shits on you." 3. In an African tribe village, the chieftain's wife gave birth to a white-skinned child. The chieftain quickly figured the voluntary doctor from Europe might be to blame, so the chieftain asked him to talk in his tent. "Chieftain, today my wife gave birth to a white child. She and I are dark-skinned. You are white. It doesn't take a doctor to figure out that you have slept with my wife." The doctor remains calm. The answer lies in the genetics. Some genetics have recessive traits which are not apparent to the parents but may be passed on to the child. For example, last week one of your sheep gave birth to a black sheep. The chieftain pauses for a thinking, then replies, "I tell you what. You say no word about black sheep, and I say no word about white child." 4. A Jets fan walks into a club with his dog. The tender says, "Hey, bud, no pets allowed in here." The man says, "But wait, this is a special dog you have to turn on the game to see. When the Jets score, my dog does flips." Sure enough, when the tender turns on the game, the Jets make a few field goals and the dog starts flipping and jumping after each kick. "Wow," said the tender, amazed. That's great. What does he do when they score a touchdown?" "I don't know. I've only had him for 2 years. 5. A new Navy recruit has his first day on the submarine. He speaks with the officer who assigns him his post. "Go stand at the periscope entryway and make sure no unauthorized personnel touch the periscope." The recruit follows orders and stands by the periscope. After 15 minutes, The officer stops by. "Son, I'm changing your post to the mess hall. Go in there and start washing some dishes." The recruit obeys and heads to the mess hall. He's cleaned about 3 dishes when the officer walks up again. "Listen here, recruit, your new post is in the supply room. I need you to make sure everything is strapped down tight in case of rough waters." The recruit again follows orders and heads off to the supply room. There, he sees a crewman moving some boxes. "Hey there," says the recruit. "Is it normal to keep getting reassigned to new posts all day? I haven't kept one position for more than 15 minutes. The crewman says, "Oh yeah, this sub is full of reposts." Seeks. A young boy enters a barber shop, and the barber whispers to his customer, "This is the dumbest kid in the world. Watch while I prove it to you." The barber puts a dollar bill in one hand and 2 quarters in the other, then calls the boy over and asks, "Which do you want, son?" The boy takes the quarters and leaves. "What did I tell you?" said the barber. "That kid never learns." Later, when the customer leaves, he sees the same young boy coming out of the ice cream parlor. "Hey, son, may I ask you a question? Why did you take the quarters instead of the dollar bill?" The boy licked his cone and replied, "Because the day I take the dollar, the game is over." Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess with 3 handsome suitors. Each suitor tried their best to charm the princess, but the princess could not choose which handsome suitor to marry. The princess did love ping pong, though, and so she decided to test the suitors' love. She summoned all 3 suitors to the grand hall and announced, "Whoever brings me the most ping pong balls shall have my hand in marriage. This is my test of love." Each suitor goes off to meet the challenge. The first suitor comes back a few weeks later with loads and loads of horse-drawn carriages filled with ping-pong balls. The convoy stretches as far as the eye can see. Altogether, they amount to 1 million ping-pong balls, and the princess is impressed. The second suitor realizes he has to up his game and hires a fleet of ships to gather and deliver the ping-pong balls. A few months later, ships upon ships line the harbor in front of the princess's castle, and the princess swoons at the sight of 100 million ping-pong balls being offered to her. The third and final suitor then shows up a year later. He's all bloodied and beaten up with horrible scars across his arms. In his left hand, he clutches a big brown heavy sack. The princess confronts him, clearly unimpressed, and says, "What are you doing? Clearly, this can't beat the 100 million ping-pong balls I had from my second suitor. Stop wasting my time." Confused, the third suitor says to the princess as she turns to leave, "But my princess, I thought you said King Kong balls." 8. In this humorous courtroom scenario, a woman and her husband find themselves before a judge. The judge, puzzled by their presence, asks the woman to explain the reason for their appearance in court. The woman recounts a comical incident, explaining that earlier that day she was in the grocery store, bending over a freezer to select a couple of steaks for dinner. At that moment, her husband became unexpectedly aroused and proceeded to pull down both of their pants, engaging in an intimate act right there in the grocery store, with her hanging over the freezer. Amused and still curious about how this led to a legal matter, the judge inquires further, asking, "But how does that put you in court in front of me?" With a mischievous grin, the woman delivers the punchline. "We were at the grocery store, Your Honor." 9. While waiting in line at an ice cream shop, an elderly woman orders a plain chocolate cone.
The man behind the counter said, "We're out of chocolate today, but there are other flavors with chocolate in them. What would you like?"
She again attempts to order plain chocolate. The man repeats, "Ma'am, we're out of chocolate today, but there are other flavors with chocolate in them. What would you like?" She again asks for plain chocolate. Knowing he isn't getting anywhere, he asks her, Ma'am, can you spell the van in vanilla? She replies, of course, van. Good, he exclaimed, then says to her, ma'am, can you spell the straw in strawberry? She replies, of course, straw. He finishes his point by saying, ma'am, can you spell the fuck in chocolate? Looking dumbfounded, she says, well, there is no fuck in chocolate. He yells, that's what I've been saying, there's no chocolate. 10. A priest lived behind his chapel. And one morning he heard a knock on his door. The priest opens the door and finds an armless man standing there. How can I help you, son? Asks the priest. Well, sir, said the fellow, the name's Sam, and I'm down out of luck. It's hard to get by as an armless man, and I need to support myself so I can eat. No one wants anything to do with me, so I thought if any place would help me, it would be a church. So, is there any sort of job I could do for you, just to earn enough to get by? The priest considers this for a moment and replies, well, there is one thing I need done, but I'm not sure how you will accomplish it. Please, at least let me at least try, he pleaded. Very well, replied the priest. Follow me. The priest led him into the church and up the steeple. There was a large bell overhanging the sanctuary. I need this rung at noon every Sunday, but I'm not sure how you can pull the rope, said the priest. Without a moment's hesitation, the fellow barreled headfirst into the side of the bell and rang it. To the priest's surprise, it rang a beautiful tone. The priest gave him the job and went on his way. For many Sundays, the man did his job. No one ever noticed him, and he was rather forgotten of, even by the priest. He collected a deduction of the offerings for his support of the church without interference after service. One Sunday, when the priest was about to perform the Mass, it struck noon. The armless man promptly ran towards the bell, missed it, fell into the sanctuary, and died. Everyone stood up in shock, the priest running to him, shouting in regret. The congregation noticed the priest's intimate concern and asked, You know him? What was he doing? What is his name? The priest, after thinking for a moment, trying to remember, said, I don't know, but he rings a bell. 11. One day, the Pope is visiting America and driving around Washington in his limo when he gets an idea. Driver, I'd like to drive for a while, says the Pope. Sure, replies the driver. So the Pope takes the wheel and starts driving the limo like a maniac all around Washington, dodging in and out of traffic, going 80, cutting people off, driving over embankments and curbs. Suddenly, a cop pulls him over and walks towards the limo. When the Pope rolls down his window, the cop stops dead in his tracks. The cop then says, Okay, buddy, have a nice day, and goes back to his squad car. We've got somebody really important here, he says to his partner. Who is it, a senator? No, more important. The president? No, more important. An ambassador? I actually don't know who it is, the cop replies. But the Pope is his chauffeur. 12. One day, during a lively maths class, the teacher decided to engage her students with a question that seemed straightforward but could spark some creative thinking. As she scanned the room, her gaze settled on a group of girls in the middle row who were quietly chatting. The teacher knew them well. They were bright and quick-witted, always ready with an answer, though their responses were often more amusing than accurate. With a confident smile, the teacher decided to challenge them. She cleared her throat, signaling the class to pay attention, and then asked, Can anyone tell me what happens if you put 2 into 1? Question. The room fell silent. The kind of silence that usually meant the students were either completely stumped or carefully considering their response. The teacher watched as the girls exchanged puzzled glances, trying to decipher the meaning behind the question. Was it a trick? Was there some hidden maths concept they were missing? The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for someone to answer. Ending with a twist, ending on replies. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one girl hesitantly raised her hand. The teacher, relieved that someone was willing to try, nodded for her to speak. The girl, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution, began slowly. Miss, either you have a lot of courage to even ask that question, or for us, even just one would be too much to handle.